like to introduce you to Lorna Byrne, an Irish Catholic mystic of sorts, who has been able to see angels and spirits all her life. When the people that had surrounded her while in her childhood ignored her, they were authority figures, family and family friends who treated her different. Since the doctors told them that she was retarded, she was not forgotten by all the angels that surrounded her, though. They taught her all the important things and were so patient and loving to her. Her disability was and still is severe dyslexia, and in her childhood and years of marriage, she experienced dire poverty. So much so that the angels told her that although she wasn't to reveal to anyone that she could see and hear angels, that her mission one day would reveal to the world the truth about the realm that is unseen and how we too can connect to God through his loving and trusting angels. There was a chance that the angels told her if she revealed she could see angels, she could be put into an institution. Her whole life has been difficult just to write her name. To this day, she cannot talk and write her name at the same time. However, the angels told her she would write a book about herself and the angels. When it was time, she knew she had this mission. She just didn't know how it would happen because she couldn't properly read or write. She had been blessed with so many God moments that she was trained to feel and see the things holding people from having a relationship with a creator, whether it was physical, spiritual, or emotional. She was instructed by the angels not to reveal her gift before it was time, not to her parents or even her husband. She did, however, connect with her father and see his life review just prior to his death and was able to help him cross over. The angels, specifically Angel Elijah, showed her when she was 10 years old who she would marry and shared with her that his health would deteriorate so much so that she would tend to him before his death. Toward the end of their marriage, she was able to reveal some of her experiences to her husband. He, as well, was blessed to have her love and intercession to God to help him at the time of his death. When Lorna was with her mom prior to her death, she could see her mom's guardian angel, and he revealed to her that she did not have much time before her body dies. She could see her father's soul come to her mom and whisper in her ear. Her mom smiled. Lorna reveals that when she would visit her mother prior to her death, that her father would be around smoking his pipe, and both Lorna and her mom could smell the tobacco. When it was time to write the book, God had arranged a benefactor to have a lock tap show up at her doorstep with a software dictation program. Things came together with little effort when her first book came out. In Angels in My Hair, she reveals that her children could see the angels and lights when they were younger, but probably would not remember that something special was happening until they too would read the book themselves. Lorna has dedicated her life to remind humanity of the spiritual potential within us all. She is the author of 7 best-selling books. After Angels in My Hair, there is A Message of Hope from Angels and Angels at My Fingertips, and she has been published in more than 50 countries and 30 languages around the world. Lorna's vision of the future is one where there is no division or boundaries between people, where our spiritual side is accepted and transcends all beliefs. To accept we are not all one, to live in peace with each other and nature, our home. According to Lorna, the future is dependent on this spiritual evolution. To this day, she maintains that this gift from God is not about her. It is for you to share with people that God is real and that heaven is real. Since coming out, she has been helping people connect with their own guardian angels and being a source of hope for people. She does retreats and trainings to help anyone who is interested in asking their guardian angel to help them live in the here and now. She confirms that everyone has a guardian angel, every man, woman, and child, and it doesn't matter what religion you are, whether Catholic, Muslim, or Jewish, etc. These guardian angels are with you from the time of your conception, are the gatekeepers of your soul, and are with you every moment of your earthly life. Lorna sees all types of angels, and guardian angels are so different from the others. She has regulars, those angels that visit often. Each seem to help her learn or experience the things needed so that at the right time it is to convey to the world about how special each human soul is. Lorna talks about our guardian angels being connected to us by a bright, thin string of light. We are made in God's image, and so that spark of light that each of us has comes from the part of God. We are so much more than angels, and they are charged to help us while we are in human form and carries our soul back to God. The angels really work hard, giving us signs, and it is not easy for them. These signs are for hope, whether it is a feather for you to notice, a butterfly for you to see. Each of these things are to show you that you are loved. She tells stories of people who don't believe, and at the same time she sees their guardian angel looking sad. Each guardian angel is different from each other, and at times resemble those that they are charged to guard. They are so beautiful, and she can see them whispering in their beloved's ears to help them do the right thing to be in God's grace. Due to our own free will, we can choose not to listen to our consciences. Lorna shares that she can see certain souls as well. The angels had to share with her the difference between angels and souls that God has allowed her to see. It began with seeing and playing with her brother Christopher, who died before her birth. She could see him at times in her mother's arms, or even playing blocks with her while sitting in front of the fireplace. God allows this to happen as long as the people that mourn them need to feel them around. They are always angels praying wherever people are gathered to pray. All churches. Lorna talks about the unemployed angels. I implore you to be open to Lorna's insights. Once you start to think regularly about your own guardian angel and try to use some of the techniques Lorna shares to connect to your soul keeper, your confidence will be the faith needed to draw those angels that really want you to use them to make you and your loved ones draw closer to God. We need clarity and we need structure. As a practicing Catholic myself, I see the lack of clarity and a boom of ambiguity at the top of the hierarchy. All of this has been foretold, if you are listening. We are to look for the signs of the times. The truth will be revealed, the corruption will be uncovered, and how we respond will foretell our future. Lorna talks about being given the different future outcomes and that she see a universal church for us all. We can see now that there is no perfect church, no perfect family, no perfect people, but we have a perfect God. As Father Rippinger, exorcist, has stated November 2023, it doesn't matter what any prelate in the church does. It shouldn't affect your faith, your virtue, or your perspective. We knew this was going to happen. We were told for 150 years by Our Lady this was going to happen. Pray your rosaries daily, read sacred scripture, go to confession, go to Mass, go to adoration, rejoice in knowing God is in control. I have been inspired to share excerpts from various books of Lorna's to get her message out and into your hearts. She states there are so many unemployed angels out there just waiting to help those who ask. Lorna has been given gifts, talents, and graces from God to prepare her for these moments in this time of history we are in. We need to be prepared spiritually and shown how to be warriors like St. Michael has taught Lorna. The battle we are in is not against flesh and blood, but the principalities of the unseen realm. It is real. God is real. Satan is real. And we have to make choices in this time in history like no other time. Can you feel it? I can. What has drawn me to share what Lorna has to offer is a recent story of a friend of my older sister, Diane. I happened to overhear a discussion she had with my sister within months of my own mother's passing. Diane shared a time she revealed to my mother 25 years ago after attending my younger sister's wedding about what she saw during Mass. She was new to Catholicism, and my older sister actually helped her to prepare to receive the sacraments of initiation into the church. What we have always been taught by our wonderful, faithful, and devout parents was the presence of the angels and saints around the altar during Mass. Diane reveals a conversation that she initiated with my mother in particular because she was sensitive to spiritual encounters. She shares that when she would call up my sister and my mother would answer would always enjoy interacting with her while getting her advice and using connecting with my sister as an excuse to talk with my mother. Well, when she told my mother that she saw hundreds of ancestral angels surrounding the altar during my sister's wedding, that my mother's nonchalant response was, "They all should be there." Diane didn't know what to expect, but she didn't expect that response. Diane said that whenever my mother opened her mouth, she endeared herself to her. Well, I asked her to tell the story again so I could record it to share with my younger sister that Diane saw at her wedding. Neither her or I had ever heard of that particular incident. I then asked Diane to look up Lorna Byrne and gave a video link to her to view. I learned later that she was so taken that she ordered Lorna's books and was delighted to share with her husband some of the same things that she related to. Perhaps you too are on your way to realize that Lorna's experiences are to get all of us ready for the various possible futures to come. We will all have an opportunity to communicate regularly with our God and our guardian angels. They are real, and although you and I may not be able to see them now, that we will be offered an opportunity like no other time in history. This is part of my spiritual journey to share with you how much we are loved by God and how we are to be spiritually prepared for what is to come. I am going to tell you about what I saw at a Mass at this conference, but of course I see similar things at Mass in my own local church or in any other part of the world when I have attended Mass. As Mass began, in the big conference room, the light of the guardian angels behind everyone became bright. There were also many angels on the makeshift altar. It was a big stage, but it seemed enormous given the number of angels on it. There were two huge angels on either side of the priest. As the priest lifted the host, an enormous angel seemed to come through his body and lift the host with the priest, and then took it to heaven in a flash. He was absolutely beautiful to watch. At the same moment as the angel carried the host up to heaven, the light of the Holy Spirit came down and into the host, infusing it with God's grace. As people went up for communion, there were two angels on either side of the priest, enhancing the host as the people were receiving communion. I see angels physically every day, and they are very beautiful. But you have a soul which is much more beautiful than any angel. Each and every one of us, human beings, regardless of religion or beliefs, is God's child. God loved us all so much that he gave us each a little spark of himself. This speck of light of God is our soul. On occasions, I have been privileged to be allowed to see a human soul. When I see someone's soul, it takes my breath away, because souls are unbelievably beautiful. To be honest, I think they are probably indescribable, and I am still searching for words to describe this beauty. About a year ago, I was visiting my mother, who lives on her own in the country. She's now in her mid-80s. She has learned a lot more about me since I started talking about what I have been seeing all of my life, and I was thrilled when she came to the launch of my first book. On this day, we had gone out to do some shopping and had some lunch, and we were back sitting and chatting in Mom's front room. Later, I went into the kitchen to make tea with Angel Hostess, knocked on the window, and came in and joined me. God wants to show you something very special, he said. Go and have a look in the front room. I walked quietly down to the door of the front room, which was ajar, and peeped in. My mother was fast asleep in the chair by the fire. She looked so peaceful, sleeping there. I said to Angel Hostess without words. He told me to keep watching. As I stood there, looking at my mother and thinking how much I loved her, I got a big surprise. The light of her guardian angel grew extremely bright. At the same time, my mother's soul sat up out of her body. My mother's soul glowed so brightly. It was many times brighter than her guardian angel or any other angel. The light of a soul is perfect and crystal clear. No light in the world can resemble the light of a soul in any way, not even the light of the biggest, brightest diamond, because the soul is lit up by the light of God. I have been asked whether, when I am shown a soul, the light hurts my eyes. Strangely, it doesn't seem to hurt them at all. The shape and form was that of my mother's body, but was bigger. Within this beautiful, bright, and crystal clear shape, I could see the image of my mother's human body.
but it was as a perfect young body, not the rather old and rickety body that was asleep in the chair. It was incredibly beautiful seeing the reflection of my mother, looking so young and so perfect in every way. My mother's soul turned and looked at me. I was deeply moved by what I was being shown. I believe I was shown my mother's soul that day simply because I had asked. I had been shown my father's soul many years before when he was dying, and I had always hoped and prayed that I would also be shown my mother's soul one day. Your soul fills every single part of your body. There is no part of your body that is not illuminated by this light. It's hard to explain. Your soul is so tiny, but yet enormous. Your soul is a speck of God's light and is perfect and indescribably beautiful. I'm not allowed to see everyone's soul. In my life, I have probably been shown several hundred souls, and I have been given glimpses of thousands of others, where the soul steps forward in the body slightly. I am always deeply moved and honored when I am allowed to see even a glimpse of a soul. It is such a privilege. I believe I have been shown souls that I can share the information with others so that I can help people to believe that they have a soul. I have been asked how I know that everyone has a soul. My answer, which may not satisfy you, is that I see a guardian angel with everyone. This guardian angel is the gatekeeper of your soul, and God wouldn't have given you a guardian angel if you didn't have a soul. My faith is very strong. I am helped, of course, by seeing angels physically all of the time, and sometimes seeing souls. I know that everyone has a soul, even though I can't prove it to you. Because we have souls that are in the image of God, we are more than any angel. Angels are created by God, but they have no soul. We are God's children. Angels love to be around us because we each possess a soul. When angels are with us, imperfect as we may feel we are, they are in the presence of the light of God. We embody God. To me, this is indescribable. Just think about it. God loved each and every one of us so much so that he has given us a part of himself. I'm not sure that we humans have really grasped just how wonderful this is.
Saint Michael the Archangel gave Lorna a prayer that she wrote down. It took her a while. And then her husband copied it and had it printed out. So anyone that came to the house and wanted to speak with Lorna, anyone that had health issues, these were handed out for them to pray. Prayer of thy healing angels that is carried from God by Michael, thy archangel. Pour out thy healing angels, thy heavenly host upon me, and upon those that I love. Let me feel the beam of thy healing angels upon me, the light of your healing hands. I will let thy healing begin, whatever way God grants it. Amen. America is the gateway to man's future. Lorna has been shown the various possible futures for America and the world. Many are so wonderful, peaceful, and good. It is more than possible. It is possible. The future holds no use for the internet. She could see children playing, and one would head toward the river, and the rest would follow. They would get to the other side without the use of the bridge. The evolvement of consciousness, the connection of life, the grass and the plants and everything around them responding to them, to help you think that what we think is impossible is possible. Lorna sees the angel of hope every day. He is like a beacon of light. This huge, enormous flame, this faint appearance, 1,000,000,000 times bigger than the Olympic torch. Lorna was shown that she will be moving to Thomastown. The property came up as a joke to her son, and after watching the video, she recognized it as what the angels had shown her. It took effort to accrue the property, but God arranged for its purchase, and with donations, continued improvement. She had this as a retreat spot to give one-on-one attention to people. Archangel Michael told her that this sanctuary would still be around for over 300 years to bring peace. The last paragraph of chapter 28, the energy of nature. All you really need to remember is that someday, in the future, you will be able to see the energy coming from everything, including yourself, those you love, and your children. Sometimes I wish God would allow people to see this energy clearly. I'm going to leave this as something of a mystery for you for now. I'm going to share excerpts from the various books that Lorna dictated with help from her many angels, to help relay how there are many angels out there that want you to ask for their help. They are ready, willing, and able to come to your assistance. You just need to make the request. They need your permission. Because of our free will, we make choices all the time, even though we don't actually want to entertain the devil and his minions. By not accepting God or thinking about him and desiring a relationship with him, we are unwittingly giving permission to the evil one. These excerpts have stuck out to me to make sure you know of the various ways that we could recognize the guardian angels and the angels' presence and even have a relationship with them. And all of this is to bring us closer to God. Making Room for God. It's chapter 4 of Lorna Byrne's Angels at My Fingertips. There is one thing I have never shared with you about my own guardian angel. I know I have told you all that your guardian angel never leaves you for 1 second. I've told you about times when God is with me and ruffles my hair. I've already told you in Angels in My Hair about the time when he walked through the fields with me and we sat by the river Shannon at the old chalet in Mountain Shannon, County Clare. My guardian angel doesn't leave me at these times, but stands to one side. And it's as if I am alone with God. I actually physically feel the presence of my guardian angel, his energy, his essence, as he steps to one side of me. Explaining this to you is not going to be easy. It is as if part of me has stood to one side. Your guardian angel is connected to you by a very fine thread of light, and I guess this is why I would feel this on different occasions. This only happens when I'm in the presence of God. I have often turned my head to the right when God is there, and I would see my guardian angel standing there just a few feet away from me. But yet it would feel as if my guardian angel was a million miles away from me. I know my guardian angel has to step to one side when God visits me, and I do thank my guardian angel for doing it ever so gently. Feeling that powerful force of your guardian angel stepping to one side is really quite incredible. I know I'm not really explaining very well, but the other part is that when your guardian angel steps back, the infusion of its power around you is so welcoming. You feel so relieved. On occasion, when I have looked back at my guardian angel and seen him standing there, God has said to me, "Don't worry, Lorna. Your guardian angel can never leave you." "What question do you want to ask, Lorna?" said Angel Hostess one day. He must have seen I had something on my mind. "When do you people experience this stepping aside?" "Lorna, people only experience this when they have already died. When their soul has gone to heaven with their guardian angel. It is only at a certain point of time when they are in heaven that your guardian angel can step away from your soul. Because when your soul is in heaven, you don't need your guardian angel with you all of the time. Your guardian angel is always in constant prayer for those who have been left behind, your loved ones and their descendants. Your guardian angel can never be anyone else's guardian angel. It can only be the guardian angel of that soul that God has appointed it to, and that guardian angel is with that soul in heaven for eternity. But they don't need to be with each other every second. I would often dilly-dally when walking home from school. We lived in Ballymum at the time, and it was a fair walk. There was a school bus, but I always preferred to walk. On this particular day, I wandered into one of the fields and was picking some wildflowers. I sat down on a clump of grass and spread my flowers out on the ground, putting them in bunches of white daisies, yellow cowslips, and wildflower that was purple in color. I started to talk to my guardian angel. I was actually giving out, saying, "Well, I asked you for a feather. 3 days now have passed, and I have not found one feather anywhere, not even in this field." I waited for a minute and then said to my guardian angel, "Are you not talking to me?" I got no reply, and I felt very guilty. I told my guardian angel that I was sorry for giving out about the feather. Still sitting on the grass, I said to my guardian angel, "I would really love a feather to go with the flowers. A black and white one would be lovely, but I don't think you are listening to me." I sorted out my flowers, got up, and started to walk across the field to the far side.
There were no angels around me. I knew my guardian angel was there, though, but I was not very happy with my guardian angel because I hadn't got the feather I had asked for. As I walked across the fields, I picked the odd flower. I dropped some of them, and as I bent down to pick them up, my guardian angel's hand went over mine. I said, "You're here!" My guardian angel replied with excitement, "Yes, of course, I'm here. Lorna, do you really want a feather?" "Yes." "You do know I can't give you one of my own." I laughed and said, "Of course not. So I'll have to get a bird to leave the feather for you." Lorna walked over towards the big tree over there. "Okay," I said, and just before I reached the tree, I found a feather in among the grass. I jumped for joy. It was black and white. "How did you do that?" I said to my guardian angel. "A black and white feather is not easy to find." "I know, Lorna, but I knew you would ask again today for a black and white feather. Yesterday there was a jackdaw that had a mixture of black and white in some of its feathers, and it lost one, so it could be left for you." "Thank you," I said to my guardian angel, but I hope that didn't mean the bird would be feeling a bit cold if it lost its feather before it should. "Don't worry, Lorna. Another feather is already growing in its place. You don't have to concern yourself about the bird feeling cold." "Thank you," I said as I admired my feather, holding it up to the sunlight and blowing on it. That was the way the angels taught me how to clean a feather and put it in among wild flowers. I skipped almost all the way home. I gave the flowers to my mom, and she put them in the window of the kitchen. They looked very pretty. I love bringing home flowers to my mom. I've seen angels give people feathers all of the time. It is one of the many signs that angels give us when we need hope in our life. If, for example, we are asking for a sign of hope when a loved one has passed away, sometimes we ask for a further sign to know that they are at peace and are in heaven. I often remember being at fishing competitions with my dad in different locations across the country, and the angels telling me that one of the fishermen, called Pat, had been praying to God asking for a sign. It was to give him hope that everything would be all right for himself and his family, that things would work out. On this particular outing, Dad was fishing with about 10 other fishermen, and they would move along the riverbank. The angels pointed out Pat every time he picked up his fishing bag to move along to fish at another spot. There would be a feather just under the bag or beside it every time. And I can tell you, I had a good look around searching to see if there were any other feathers anywhere else, but there were not. This kept happening over and over again, but Pat wasn't noticing. It was starting to get dark, and my dad said, "I think we'll have to head home soon." One of the fishermen replied, "Just a few more casts into the river, and then we'll pack up." All the while, I was just watching the angels working so hard that day to give this man a feather to provide him the hope he needed. I thought he would never notice it, but just as he was packing up his fishing gear and as he lifted the bag from the ground, he hesitated for a moment. Then he bent down and picked up the feather. He looked at it, but did not say a word to anyone and put it in his pocket. At the same moment, I saw his guardian angel embracing it. I asked what was wrong, but I didn't get an answer. The angels didn't say anything to me. I often see angels giving people feathers, but most of the time we don't notice them. The angels really work hard giving us signs, and it's not easy for them. They use the feathers of the birds of the air, so birds have to play their part too. They tend to use feathers because they are light. Angels find it easier to move minds than physical objects. I have described physical manifestations of angels in my books, knocking on doors or windows or causing winds to blow, but they are quite rare. Most of the time, when you ask for the sign of a feather, you will find it in an unusual place, somewhere you are not expecting to find a feather. There were no feathers along the riverbank, only one each time beside Pat's fishing bag. To me, that is a miracle. I just don't know how the angels do it. We are just so slow, even myself at times, to recognize the signs the angels give us. We pass them by. There was a friend of mine who said she would love to get a feather from an angel. She said she had been asking all her life but never received one. The angels around her that day told me that she had already received lots of feathers but never saw them.
Even when the angels put them directly in front of her, she would dismiss them, thinking they were not really from the angels because they didn't appear in places where you really wouldn't expect to find a feather. So I asked on her behalf, and it was about 6 months later when I met her again, and she said to me, "Lorna, I received my feather." I said to her, "I told you that you would. Where did you find it?" She said, "You won't believe this, but I found it in my shoe." "That is incredible," I asked her. "Are you happy now?" She said, "Yes, I am." How did the angels manage to put a feather in her shoe? I really don't know, but it was the way of the angels. Sometimes there is no explanation for how the guardian angels do it. I know that they have other angels to help them, and that they need our cooperation as well. So if your guardian angel puts a thought into your head, respond to it. Someone may have asked for a sign, and you're meant to help to give that person that sign. What you are asked to do might be very simple. It might be to make that phone call or write a letter. It could be to give someone a flower, a smile, or your seat so they can sit down. It might even be to buy someone a cup of tea or to give someone a helping hand, even a stranger. One thing my guardian angel and all of the other angels have always taught me is something that my grandmother used to say as well. They always repeat these words to me: give with a pure heart and expect nothing in return. One of the occasions when my mom was in the hospital, my sister and I were staying at my grandmother's. We had been living in Ballymun at the time, but my grandmother didn't live very far from Old Kilmainham, so I knew the area. Sometimes my granny would send me down to the shops to run a few errands. I loved going to the shops because it gave me a little time to spend on my own, and of course, I would never stop talking to my angel on the way down to the shops. Sometimes I would play a game. One of the games I played was trying to step into my guardian angel's enormous feet, but I never succeeded. I knew it was impossible to do so because my guardian angel told me it wouldn't be allowed. But we played the game anyway. When I would step forward with my right foot, my guardian angel would put its right foot forward first. I was to try to step into my guardian angel's foot, but it would always disappear no matter how fast I walked. I would often say to my guardian angel, "That's not fair. Let's start all over and no cheating." My guardian angel would laugh. Its laughter was not like Archangel Michael's laughter. It was much softer. My guardian angel would say, "I don't cheat. I can't. That's impossible, Lorna." I would stop and say, "Okay, let's go again. Right foot, then left." I would be walking as fast as I could, almost running, trying to step into my guardian angel's feet. Sometimes I would laugh so much that when I got to the shops, I would have to stop and take a deep breath. A woman carrying shopping bags one day stopped and asked me, "What kind of game are you playing?" I smiled at her because I didn't know what to say. At the same time, I spoke silently to my guardian angel. My guardian angel said, "Say you're trying to play a game of catching up with your feet, but you can't because your feet are always ahead of you." I did exactly as my guardian angel said and repeated the words to the lady. She hesitated for a moment before she replied. "You're right," she said. "You can't catch up with your feet. That's a funny one." Off she went, carrying her shopping bags. My guardian angel said, "Lorna, you cheered her up." During the school summer holiday, when we were living in Edinmore, I was out playing with some other children on the street. I may have been 12 years of age at the time. I had to run down into the far cul-de-sac when a neighbor called me and asked me if I would like to take her baby for a wheel in this pram just up and down the road. She was trying to get the baby to go to sleep. The mother, Catherine, wheeled the pram out the front garden gate, and then I took over, wheeling the baby up and down the road for at least an hour. I often did this for mothers who lived on the street, and I loved doing it. The baby was restless and cried every now and then. I just said, "Angels, can you help the baby?" Its cheeks were all red, so I knew the baby was teething. An angel came alongside the pram, dressed in a golden flowing gown, and said to me, "Lorna, stop for a moment." I did, and the angel bent over the pram, looking at the baby. Then the angel put its hand over the baby for a second. I don't know exactly what the angel did, but all I know is that the baby stopped crying, and its little eyes started to close, and it fell asleep.
The angel turned and smiled at me. I said thank you to the angel, and then it disappeared. A bit later, some angels came over and had a look at the baby in the pram fast asleep. Later, I took the baby back, going through the gate just as its mother came out the door. I said to her that little Jack was fast asleep. The baby's mother gave a big smile as she looked at her little baby, and at the moment, loads of angels came around the pram. I said goodbye and walked up the road. My guardian angel said, "Why don't you go down to the green, Lorna, and sit by the river?" I did exactly as my guardian angel said and sat down on the grass by the river bank. It was only really a small stream. It was on the outside of the housing estate running along the main road. When you sat at the riverbank, you couldn't be seen from the main road, and I liked that because I felt I would be alone with the angels. Chapter 12. Seeing Joe Again. I had only arrived back from London on the 25th of March, and my daughter, Ruth, was coming the next day to visit me with her children. After doing a quick tidy up, I gave Ruth a call and asked around what time did she think she would get down to Kilkenny. She told me that Billy Bob, her son, didn't finish school until 12. She would have everything already packed and they would leave straight away, so she guessed it would be around 2:30 p.m. I had to go into Kilkenny to get my hair done, so I checked that she had a key for the house. When I was in the hairdresser's, I got a call from Ruth telling me that they hadn't arrived yet and to take my time. There was no hurry on either side. I told her I'd be another while yet. I asked if there was anything that was needed from the supermarket. She said no, because they were only down for one night. The next day, we headed up to Dublin as my daughter had an appointment for 11 o'clock. When we arrived in the town of Swords in County Dublin, Ruth told the children to be good for their granny while she went to her appointment. We were beside a big shopping center. We passed the time doing lots of walking and looking at the pretty things in the shops. It was cold, but when the sun came out from behind the clouds, it was lovely to feel the heat. On our walk around the shopping center, I was holding little Jessica's hand with Billy Bob walking beside me. He reminded me that this was an important day because I hadn't been to his home in a while. "It is Granddad's anniversary," he said. "We can't forget to remind Mammy that we have to go to Woody's to get flowers and some bags of peat for Granddad's grave." I looked down at him and said, "We won't forget, but we may have to go for something to eat first, and I know Woody's is not far from here. Woody's is a big hardware store and garden center." My heart was moved hearing my little grandson saying this to me. He never met his granddad, but he knew all about him. We continued walking in the sunshine, but then it turned very cold, so we headed back to the main entrance of the shopping center. Just as we were about to go through the doors to get warm, the children cried out, "Mammy!" Ruth was back. They ran to her in excitement. You would think she had been gone for hours. They reminded their mother about going to Woody's. She said to them, "Let's go for something to eat first." But the children insisted, "Woody's first and then food after." So a few minutes later, we drove over there. The children helped to pick the flowers for planting at their granddad's grave. When that was done, the children were very happy, so we went for food. Then we headed straight to Maynooth, through the town and up to the graveyard. The children got out of the car, full of excitement, and we carried all the stuff into the graveyard. Billy Bob was walking with me across the grass towards Joe's grave. He said, "Which one is Granddad's grave? It's hard to pick out." I looked and said, "There it is." As we got closer, I glanced around the graveyard. I saw around 20 angels. I knew they were waiting on people to come in and visit the graves of their loved ones. When we visit the grave of a loved one, there are always angels around you, helping to comfort you and ease your pain. I've never passed a graveyard and not seen angels in it. The angels are not there for the dead, but for the living. It is only the human body that is buried in the ground. Their guardian angel has taken their soul lovingly to heaven. When we were all at Joe's grave, the children walked among the little white pebbles, pulling the weeds out. With a small hand shovel, I was taking the weeds out of the little sections where we were going to put the peat moss so the new plants would blossom later and have beautiful flowers. We need to take care like this, to grieve like this, showing signs of love we have for the departed. Souls like to see us doing these things because they know it does us good. I was working away with Billy Bob, came over and stood beside me. He said, "Granny, do you want a helping hand?" So I loosened the weeds and he pulled them out. I remember looking up and seeing my little granddaughter busy pulling weeds from among the white pebbles. She was so busy enjoying herself, helping and feeling the importance of what she was doing, even though she was so young. I never shared this with my daughter or any of my family, so I know this is the first time for them hearing the story. I just found it very hard that day. My heart was hurting. I felt very emotional. I was afraid if I told Ruth I would burst out crying. So now I will tell you what happened at the gravesite. There was Jessica bent down, pulling weeds with her little fingers and feeling very proud whenever she pulled a weed out. She would hold it up and look at it with amazement. In her baby talk and touching the roots with her fingers, she asked what they were. She did not know exactly what the things dangling from the weed were, but her mom explained to her that they were the roots of the weed. Jessica stood there for another moment, looking at the weed she held up in her hand. Then she looked down at her feet and moved the stones. I didn't know what she was thinking or what she would do next. She walked over to the edge of her granddad's grave and threw the weed in her mom's direction. I watched her get back down on her hunkers as she found another weed to pull at. It was very tiny. It was then I heard my name called. I looked up and saw the soul of Joe standing at the gravestone. My husband Joe died in March 2000. He was only 46. When I saw him at the gravestone, he looked youthful and healthy again. He looked very handsome. He had one arm on the headstone, kneeling slightly over, looking down at her. Then he looked up and looked at all of us. He gave a big smile and said, "Hello." He stood there for a few moments, just watching his grandchildren. I was so moved because I had not asked or prayed that I would see Joe there at the grave, but I know he was letting me know that he was looking after them. I spoke to him silently, saying my other 2 little grandchildren could come, but maybe it would be another day. He said, "They don't need to come. I'm there with them too." Ruth, busy sorting out the plants with Billy Bob, looked up in the direction of her little girl and called out to her that she was doing a great job. I can't express the way Joe looked at her with such love. Joe turned to me and said, "God just decided to give you a surprise, Lorna." When Joe was standing there for those few moments, his grave was surrounded by angels. All I can say is a multitude of angels surrounded us all, encircling us in a non-broken circle. The sun shone bright and warm. I was distracted for a moment when my little grandson said, "Gran, here's a nice flower to plant." He got down on his hunkers to make a hole in the peat to put the plant in. I helped him, but when I looked up, Joe was gone. I was disappointed. My granddaughter was now helping her mom take some plants out of the pots to be planted. We were all very busy. I was very moved. Every now and then I would look up at Joe's headstone in the hopes that he would appear again, but he didn't. I would be thinking of the way he stood at the headstone looking down at his granddaughter and then over at his grandson. How he was watching us all. Later on, I know we'll have to explain more to the children that their granddad is not really there in the grave. His soul has gone to heaven. A grave is somewhere we can visit to remind us of our loved one. We feel are still taking care of them by bringing them flowers and looking after the grave. Helps with the grieving process. Even though my grandchildren didn't know Joe, they are grieving in a different way. The loss of the grandfather they have never met. I could see on that day how important it was for them to play their part, helping at their grandfather's grave. They were getting to know him in a spiritual way, knowing that their grandfather was in heaven with God. There was one plant left, and Billy Bob was about to give it to me when his mom said, "No, we are going to bring that little plant up to baby Bridget's grave." I was very moved when I heard Ruth say this. I never expected her to think of baby Bridget's grave. I looked to my right to the wall of the graveyard where the car was parked, and on the opposite side there was Archangel Michael. He was standing on the far side of the wall. He spoke to me without words and said, "Lorna, shortly you are going to meet an angel you have not seen in a long time." I didn't get a chance even to say hello or to ask questions because immediately after Archangel Michael spoke, his disappeared. I didn't know what it was all about, but I was happy that my daughter thought of baby Bridget's grave and of keeping one of the flowers to plant up at her grave. Now, I have something important to share with you of what happened next, something that was completely unexpected for me. The angel that Archangel Michael spoke about was a complete surprise to me. Let me start with this part of the story first. It brings happiness and tears to my eyes. It really emotionally pulls at my heartstrings. I'm only going to tell you what happened on this particular day in Maynooth graveyard with my daughter and grandchildren. I know I have to give you a little bit of information that happened many years ago too, but it's only going to be a sentence or two. Many years ago, baby Bridget's little body was found by a man walking his dog. I have written about this in Angels in My Hair. It's the spiritual journey about baby Bridget and what happened before her little body was found. I know you will find it very moving, but now I will go back to this particular day in question. On that day at the graveyard on March 2016, Ruth gathered up a couple of things from the ground and took Jessica's hand. Billy Bob carried the flower, holding it with his two hands, and they walked toward baby Bridget's grave. I watched them go and finished tidying up where I had been planting flowers at Joe's grave. Ruth shouted back to me, "Ma'am, hurry up." "Okay," I said, "I'm coming." I reached down, picked up my bag, and started to follow them. Just before they reached baby Bridget's grave, I stopped walking and just stood there looking in the direction of the grave. I saw an angel standing by her grave who I have not seen since the day I met him on the bridge in Maynooth, years before Joe's death. It was Angel Arabic. He is the angel that as a teenager I went to meet every day on the bridge. When I walked down to Maynooth Village, he told me about baby Bridget before she was born. He was tall, slender, elegant, and whiter than snow. Angel Arabic glowed like a radiant light. He stood to the right of baby Bridget's headstone. "Hello, Lorna," he said. I said hello in return without using words. Ruth and the children were already at baby Bridget's grave. Angel Arabic said, "Come." I started to walk slowly, and just when I was a few feet away, the soul of baby Bridget, some people might say her spirit, peeped out from behind Angel Arabic. Baby Bridget gave a human appearance of a little girl who was about 4 years old with long wavy hair to her shoulders. She appeared to be wearing a little blue dress that just glowed at her feet that were bare. She was giggling as she watched Jessica and Billy Bob playing. It was only for a few moments, yet standing there watching the soul of baby Bridget felt like an eternity. Angel Arabic spoke to me without words. "Lorna, we have to go now." At that moment, baby Bridget looked at me with a big smile and at the same time changed her human appearance from that of a child to a teenager and then to a young woman. She was very beautiful. I said to Angel Arabic, "Will I see you again?" He replied, "Maybe." I asked if I would see baby Bridget again, and Angel Arabic said, "No, only if God changes his mind." The two of them disappeared. Baby Bridget's little body was found in the canal in Maynooth. The angels brought her soul to my house in the early hours of the morning on the day her little body was found. For the few days before that, the angels were lining the path from the canal along the bridge and to my front door so that her soul could travel to me. I do believe that Angel Arabic appeared on that particular day with baby Bridget, not only for me, but for her mother and her family, to let them know that she is happy and that she loves them. Bridget is safe in heaven. The little flower was planted on baby Bridget's grave. My grandchildren were happy they had done this. We all walked back to Joe's grave. I picked up all the weeds and put them in the bin that was provided at the graveyard. When we were finished, we walked out of the graveyard hurriedly as it was starting to rain. Later that evening, I headed back home to Kilkenny. On the way home in the car, I said a prayer for all of baby Bridget's family. One of the other things I thought about was the birthrights of every child. About half an hour after I arrived home, quite late, I made myself a cup of tea and then went to bed. I always keep a jotter on the little table beside my bed. I said my prayers. When I was finished, I decided I would start to scribble things down in the jotter before going to bed. Just a few little things, mind you. You wouldn't be able to read it because it was more or less in my code that I understand. As you know, I'm not very good at spelling. It only took me a few minutes to write down a few notes, and then I fell asleep. Over the next few days, I did very little writing of this book because I had a few visitors calling to me. I had lots of other writing to do, though. My newsletter, Facebook posts, tweets, and Instagram posts, and of course, work with my charity, the Lorna Byrne Children's Foundation. There were a fair few meetings as well. Of course, I am a mother, like all the mothers out there, with cleaning, washing, and gardening to do. I also try to get out for a walk as often as possible. The angels are always at me to get out and go for a walk, to help to keep myself fit. But it rains an awful lot in Ireland, so I don't get out very often. Chapter 26. An evil spirit shows up. Angels in my hair. Sometimes a person will let Satan enter their life. This can happen through deliberate, malicious intent, or through feelings of jealousy, anger, or a perception that life hasn't been fair to them. For example, Satan frequently gains access to individuals when there is a dispute over property or will. The extent to which Satan can darken a soul varies. His influence may give an individual what appears externally to be a great life, but the lives of those around them will be damaged. Ultimately, if nothing is done, the soul of the person involved will be destroyed. Growing spiritually, reconnecting with God and the angels, and letting God's love and compassion back into the heart is the only way of driving out Satan. The angels will help when you ask them. It doesn't even have to be the person who was affected who asked. A family member or a friend can also pray for help, and I have seen many occasions where this had worked. It's worth remembering this when you come across evil in your own life. A prayer from anyone of any belief or background can and does make a significant difference. People can grow spiritually unbeknownst to themselves. They may not notice it happening. Perhaps someone prayed for them. Perhaps as a child they asked, and years later they will be spiritually awakened. I meet a lot of people to whom this has happened. Over the years, many people have come to visit me who are under Satan's influence. To some extent, I will always see it because Satan can't resist showing off his presence. One time, a successful Irish businessman came to see me. He said he wasn't sure why he was there, but that a friend of his had convinced him to come, although he admitted it had taken his friend 2 years to persuade him to do so. He told me he had done some terrible things. He admitted that he never ever considered how this action would affect others. As far as he was concerned, there was only one person who mattered, himself, and one thing that mattered, money. Something was happening to him, though. His old friends no longer liked him, and his family would have nothing to do with him. But I know that someone was praying for him, and that was why he had come to me. He asked me why he felt no remorse. Somewhere, somehow, he knew he had done wrong. He knew he should feel remorse, but he didn't know how to feel it. He wanted to be able to feel remorse, and he wanted to get his friends and family back. The man sat with crossed arms at my kitchen table and said he wanted to change. He didn't want to be like this anymore. His head was bowed, but I could see there were tears in his eyes. Then I was shown the evil spirit of Satan coming forward. The man was a little bent over the kitchen table, resting on his crossed arms with his head down. But I saw a distorted face rise, as if out of his chest, from the depth, very depth of his being, and turn its head sideways. The man was sitting perfectly still, as if this were unknown to him. The distorted face, the face of evil, looked at me and sniggered. This time, as on the other occasions when I have seen evil spirits within people, it seems to be saying, "I almost fooled you this time. You nearly didn't catch me." For some strange reason, I don't fully understand, evil spirits cannot resist showing themselves to me. And when this happens, I know that Satan has lost again. and that God and the angels have won. I prayed over the man, blessed him, then gave him the healing prayer, which he put into his wallet. Over the next few months, I constantly prayed for him. About a year later, I got a phone call from him. He told me that his life had changed, that it had actually begun to change when he left my house, but that he had been afraid to acknowledge it. He was trying to make restitution to at least some of the people he had hurt. He said his business was going well, but he was not managing it in an honest way. He hoped he hadn't left it too late to thank me and God and the angels. I reminded him to keep asking the angels to help him and never forget to thank them for anything, no matter how small. To this day, I pray for him. One day, as I was crossing the main road on my way to the shopping in Maynooth, I heard a voice say, "Slow down, Lorna." I couldn't see anything other than a light beside me, but I knew it was Michael's voice. "Let's turn up this little lane so we can talk in peace." I turned right into a little lane and walked until I was sure I could not be seen from the road, and then, as I knew would happen, Michael appeared in human form. Well, very human, except I thought he looked a bit too new and too perfect. When I looked into his eyes, I could see the angel in him. "On your way to Maynooth, we want you to walk slowly across the canal bridge," he said, "and take a look down along the canal as far as you can see." "What's wrong?" I asked. "Tell me before I cross the bridge." "Lorna," Michael said, "you are unaware at this moment of a little baby's soul, the soul of a baby that has been conceived but not yet born. At the moment you cross the bridge, your two souls will become connected. You'll also become aware of the mother, but she will be like a ghost to you, very faint." I felt as though he was talking to me as if I were a child, as if I wouldn't understand. "Michael, I'm a grown woman now with children of my own," I replied. "I don't understand what's going on, but I accept the connection between this little soul and myself. Will you walk over the bridge with me?" "No, Lorna, you must walk over the bridge on your own. Walk slowly. There will be another angel on the bridge to help you understand, to help you to get to know this little baby soul as it grows in its mother's womb. Do whatever the angel asks. Every time you cross the bridge, this angel will be there to meet you and accompany you for a part of the journey. Your connection to this baby's soul will grow stronger as the months pass." We turned around to walk back up the lane, and as we approached the main road, Angel Michael disappeared. I looked in the direction of the canal bridge, and sure enough, I could see an angel waiting for me. He was tall, slender, elegant, and white as snow with a radiant light. I walked slowly as Michael had told me to, and as I put my foot on the bridge, I felt the connection with the little soul. The angel was standing in the center of the bridge, and when I reached him, we stood together. He looked at me with great gentleness and love, saying, "My name is Angel Arabic." Angel Arabic touched my hand, and I turned to look down along the canal. Everything was like glass. Nothing seemed to move, as if it were a picture. I was allowed to feel the mother and the love she had for her unborn, and I could feel her tears, lots of tears. As I stood there on the bridge, someone walked past and said hello. I replied out of habit. I walked the rest of the way across the bridge, then down the hill toward the town. All the time, the angel walked beside me. People and cars passed in both directions. I whispered, "See you soon, Angel Arabic." Then I went to do the shopping. As time passed, the baby grew in the mother's womb, and I learned more about the little baby's soul, the love the baby was sending to its mother, and the mother's deep love for her unborn child. Even though I could never see the mother clearly, she always seemed like a ghost. I knew she was there and that she was struggling. Every day I crossed that bridge at least once, sometimes much more frequently, and often I asked Angel Arabic, who was striding beside me as if in slow motion, "Why is the connection not as strong when I walk down the hill as it is on the bridge?" Angel Arabic never answered me. One day I said to him, "Sometimes I feel as if the mother and child are in the two fields there over that wall. At times I may wanted to climb over the wall and search for them, but I know they are not there,
nor are they along the canal. Can't you tell me more? But Angel Arabic only replied, when it is needed. I have learned over the years with the angels that no matter how many times you ask a question, they never deviate from the first answer they gave you, and sometimes they will not reply at all. I must have walked with Angel Arabic hundreds of times across the bridge, and I frequently asked for information, but never got any answer other than if and when it is needed. One morning after the children had gone to school, I told Joe I would head into town to get a few bits and pieces and his prescription from the chemist, and that I would be as quick as I could. Walking from the cottage, I noticed things were different. Angel Arabic was not waiting in his usual place, but was standing at the end of my lane on the main road, some distance from the bridge. I could see there a mist on the right-hand side of the bridge, although not on the bridge itself. I reached Angel Arabic, and we walked together. I could feel the silence, the unspoken words. I wanted to speak, but knew I was not to. When I reached the bridge, I saw that it was not an ordinary mist covering the canal water and the banks of the canal. It was angels. The whole area along the canal bank leading up to the bridge was laid with a milky white mist full of angels, snow white, beautiful angels, bright as a light. I stood there overwhelmed by the beauty and strangeness of what I was seeing. Angel Arabic's hand touched mine. I heard the angels chanting as if in one voice. They were moving up and down along the canal bank all the time in slow motion within the mist. Some of them turned in my direction and acknowledged my presence. Angel Arabic told me they were getting ready. Tears came to my eyes, and at the same moment, Angel Arabic withdrew his hand. As we walked down the hill away from the bridge, I could hardly feel my feet touching the ground. The mist filled with angels pooled around my ankles. At the bottom of the hill, Angel Arabic said, "It will not be long now." I did the shopping quickly. I couldn't see any angels around me, but I knew they were there. I said to them, "I have questions to ask," but I got no answer. I was thinking I shouldn't walk home by the canal. But when I reached the center of town, I was pulled to the left, so I knew I was to walk back the way I came. Angel Arabic was waiting for me, looking more radiant than before. We walked together back up the hill towards the bridge. I looked down along the canal and knew that if I fell into this mist, I would not hit the ground, but would be cushioned and protected. In some way, that cushioning was also a preparation for the arrival of the baby, but I couldn't fully understand at the time. I later realized that the misty path laid down by the angels was a path for the little baby's spirit. Angel Arabic was waiting for it. Every time I approached the bridge, I could see the mist, and in some way I was made conscious that this little baby spirit was being ushered down by the angels. A few days later, Joe remarked that I had become very quiet, that it was as if I was somewhere else. I looked at Joe and said, "I don't think you would understand what is happening, even if I told you." "Try me," he replied. So I did. I told him a little about the angel at the bridge, about the spirit of a baby and its mother. He listened attentively and told me that he found it all hard to understand, but that he wouldn't ask any more questions. I thanked him, and he gave me a big hug. I don't know where the baby was born, if the mother was on her own or had someone with her, if it was full term or born prematurely. But one day in March, I just knew the baby had been born. From that day on, I lost all sense of time. I constantly felt the touch of Angel Arabic's hand, no matter where I was. The presence of Angel Arabic was so intense that I would not see someone walking toward me, and I would bump into them. Angel Arabic still stood in the center of the canal bridge, hovering like a powerful force. Now, when I approached the bridge, he would descend to meet me, yet he would still be hovering above it at the same time. One day, as I was going down to collect Ruth for school, I saw Angel Arabic standing at the end of the lane from the cottage. He indicated for me to cross the bridge. What I saw was breathtaking. A beautiful baby's spirit was crawling along the soft and smooth path that the angels had made. She looked as if she were crawling, her legs and arms moving, but in fact the angels were carrying her. I could see the angels' wings supporting her. Angels were all around, crawling along the path beside her, helping her, playing with her.
The baby spirit was very happy. I could hear her laughter. My heart was full of joy, and yet there were tears in my eyes. I had suddenly realized that the baby spirit was coming to my house. To this day, I don't know why I was chosen by God and the angels to see this little miracle, or why this little baby spirit was coming to my house. But she was. She was getting closer all the time. I don't know how long it took the angels to travel that distance with the baby spirit, but one day I was told they were very near. That night I went to bed and woke the next morning as normal at 6. I went into the kitchen and a brilliant light was shining in through the window. I got a glass of water, and when I turned around, Angel Arabic was standing at the kitchen door. I know I shouldn't have been startled, but I was. To this day, the angels can take my breath away. Go back to bed, Angel Arabic said, and move closer to Joe to make room for another. I did as I was told. I could feel the little baby spirit coming into the house, lying there in bed, and I could hear the sound of movement in the hall. I prayed and asked that everything would be okay for the little baby spirit. The bedroom filled with mist as angels poured into the room. They had arrived. I could see not the baby spirit, but I knew she was down on the floor surrounded by angels. Angels, can I sit up in bed? I asked. No, I was told. You're not allowed to look yet. Turn on your side and move closer to Joe so there will be more room. Doing this, I disturbed Joe, and he asked sleepily if I was cold. I was nervous that Joe might wake at this crucial moment, although a bit of me knew the angels would not let him wake fully. I felt the sheets being moved by the angels. I felt movement on the bed, and then I felt the baby spirit lying right next to me in the bed. I could see nothing of the baby spirit as I was facing Joe, and the baby spirit was now behind me. I was afraid to move in case I would lie on her or hurt her in some way. I felt the baby's hand touch my back. Can I turn around now? I asked. Yes, the angels replied. Turn around slowly and carefully. The little baby spirit is lying beside you. I turned around, terrified of squashing her. Oh my God, I exclaimed, forgetting Joe was beside me. I quickly put my hand to my mouth. Joe did not stir. There lying beside me was a gorgeous, naked, newborn baby girl. She was healthy and strong, moving her arms and legs. She was beautiful and perfect, flesh and blood, completely human in appearance, but more beautiful than any baby I have ever seen. She was radiant, the spirit within her lighting up the human body that I was being shown. 2 angels stood by the side of the bed, looking down on her. They were magnificent white angels, dressed in flowing white robes, which draped over them perfectly. They had wonderful faces like porcelain. Every feature was clear, and they shone like the sun. Their eyes glittered white as snow, and their wings of feathers seemed to spiral and touch a light above them. Can I touch her? I asked. No, you can't touch her, but you can put your hands above her, they told me. I reached out and held my hands above her. As I did so, she turned her head and looked at me. Her eyes were full of life and shone brighter than any of the stars in the skies. She smiled, and at that moment I heard her say, Tell Mommy I love her, and Dad too. Then the 2 angels bent over her and picked her up. Their wings intertwined around her. As they rose, the heavens opened with gentleness, and in a flash of light, they were gone, and the room was back to normal. I knew it was over. I praised and thanked God. Later that morning, I went to Jim the butcher's, and everyone was talking. I was asked had I heard the news. A newborn baby's body had been found along the canal bank near the bridge. No one knew who the mother was or what had happened, but a man walking his dog had found the body early that morning. I realized then that the baby had been found at the moment the angels had disappeared from my bedroom. I was so happy. I cannot explain the happiness I felt, but it was a great joy and relief to know that the baby spirit had gone to heaven, and my task was complete. The local community was very upset. They were not aware of anything like this ever happening before. They were shocked to think that there might have been a young woman, perhaps a student from the college, who had felt it necessary to keep her pregnancy secret.
The police investigated, but as far as I know, they never found the mother. Perhaps she will read this someday and realize that whatever the circumstances of her baby's death were, her little baby loved her and was never left alone. There were always angels with her, as there are with all babies, both those who live and those who die, whatever the situation. The community was so moved by this baby's death that they took up a collection and bought a grave so that the child could be buried properly. Before she was buried, the little baby was given a name, Bridget. Bridget is buried now in the graveyard in Maynooth. Joe was getting sicker and sicker, and he started having a series of minor strokes. They were terrifying for him, and sometimes he would go blind for a few minutes, or his body would go completely limp. Walking became very difficult, and he frequently fell over. Despite my best efforts to watch him and catch him, he was black and blue all over. The doctors said they could do nothing. The angels tried to cheer me up. One day I was walking around the house estates nearby, enjoying the warm sun and watching everything around me, when I came to a green area. Children were out playing football, and people were stretched out on the grass enjoying the good weather. I noticed a child in a wheelchair. She was curled up asleep. Her body seemed quite twisted, and she was pitifully thin. It was hard to tell her age, but she was probably about 7. Her mother sat on the wall a short distance off, talking to neighbors. As I got closer, I could see the child was getting brighter, as was her wheelchair. Everything became still and silent. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Her soul moved out of her body, leaving her sleeping form there in the wheelchair. It radiated light and looked just as that little girl would look when she goes to heaven, perfect in every way. 2 angels appeared in front of her and took her hands. They were both girls who looked much the same age as she was. Then 3 more angels appeared, again all little girls, dressed completely in a white so radiant that a blue tint seemed to come from it. I was unable to move, overcome by what I was seeing. This little girl's soul had stepped out of her body to play with the angels. They played chase, but they never moved too far from the wheelchair. They held hands and played Ring Around the Rosie. I could hear their laughter. The little girl's soul was so free and happy. I tried to move forward, to put one foot in front of the other, but the angels would not let me move, no matter how hard I tried. The little angels sat in a circle on the green grass near the wheelchair with the little girl's soul. I watched with fascination. I did not know what was going to happen next. All of a sudden, an angel's hands touched a blade of grass, and a daisy appeared. Then the angels started moving their hands around, touching blades of grass with the tips of their fingers, and each blade they touched turned into a beautiful daisy. There in the middle of the grass was a circle of white, awash with daisies, and in the middle of it were laughing angels and a radiant little soul. The mother continued chatting nearby, oblivious to what was going on. Daisy chains, the little soul cried out, as they started to make daisy chains. They decorated her with them, around her neck, on her head, like a princess's crown, around her arms, and even around her ankles. They showed her how to make daisy chains with little slits in them in the stem, and she sat there making them on her own. There was such love and gentleness that I could feel tears running down my cheek from the joy and happiness of what I was seeing. I watched the little girl, admiring her daisy chains. Her face shone like the sun. Then the angels put their arms around her, picked her up, and carried her to her wheelchair. She did not seem to mind. The soul lay down gently and snuggled back into her human body, which had remained sleeping all this time. As suddenly as they came, the angels left and the light was gone. The little girl moved into her wheelchair. I nearly fell over myself as I was released and able to move again. Everything around me came back to life. I heard the birds, felt the breeze, and saw the people. As I walked away from the little girl, I looked over at her mother and thought to myself how blessed she was to have such a pure soul in her family. I never knew I had a guardian angel. Chapter 14. Sometimes the angels do not give me any warning before an event. One evening when Joe and I had been married 3 months, something strange happened. It was about 11 o'clock and Joe had gone to bed.
and was reading a book while I was tidying up and getting ready for bed. We had no bathroom in the cottage at this time, so I was washing myself in front of the fire. I was only in bed about 5 minutes when I needed to go to the loo, so I climbed over the end of the bed. I opened the bedroom door and got a shock. I nearly walked into someone. "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" I exclaimed. Mrs. Costello, the old lady who had lived in the cottage until she died, was standing in front of me. She looked just as Elizabeth had described her. She was dressed in her coat and a wonderful hat with netting and with what looked like fruit on it, and she carried a big bag under her arm. "Goodbye," she said. "I am off now." She smiled at me. She looked beautiful, perfect, just like Mrs. Twinklewinkle. I don't know why she needed to say goodbye to me, but if that's what she had to do, then that was fine with me. She had given me such a start, though. I turned around and got back into bed. "What's wrong?" Joe asked. "I nearly walked into her," I said to Joe, forgetting that I hadn't yet told him that I see spirits as well. "I just met the old woman who lived here before us," I told him. "She just came to say goodbye." Joe sat up in bed and looked at me, startled. He told me to go back in bed and under the blankets. I did so quietly, hoping that Joe wouldn't think too much of the incident. He didn't. He turned around and went back to reading. Clearly, my angels were working hard. Joe never mentioned it again. I lay in bed talking to the angels, asking why Mrs. Costello had nearly let me walk into her. I don't like walking into a dead person, a spirit that has not yet gone to heaven. It feels unpleasant to have electrical shocks sent through my body. A spirit that has not yet gone to heaven has not yet been purified and feels completely different from the spirit that has gone to heaven and come back, like my brother Christopher. With spirits who have returned from heaven, I feel the life force of their soul. The angels told me that for some reason that they never explained Mrs. Costello was unable to leave the cottage until she had made contact with me, and that she needed that contact in order to be able to go to heaven. I can't explain this, but frequently I encounter souls who have not yet left this earth and gone to heaven, and for some reason I have a role to play in their passing over. A few months later, I became pregnant. Joe decided he would sell the car in order to be able to afford all the extras we would need with a baby on the way. So we were back to traveling by bus, and we both laughed about this. I found the pregnancy hard, and I complained to the angels and God all the time. The angels just laughed at me and told me to rest. My baby decided to come into the world a few weeks before his time. He was a beautiful baby boy, almost 7 pounds in weight. We were so happy. I had told Joe long before about my baby brother Christopher, who had died as an infant, and my desire to name my first son after him. So we had already decided we would call our baby Christopher. I never told Joe about my encounters with my spirit brother, though I had never been allowed to share these encounters until writing this book. I asked Joe not to mention to my parents the reason I wanted our son to be called Christopher. When my parents came to visit me in the hospital after his birth, Mom said we should name our son Christopher, after her dad, my grandfather. I smiled at Joe and said we had already chosen the name Christopher. Joseph squeezed my hand. When I brought Christopher home from the hospital, I was like any young mother, nervous and fussing over him. He was strong and healthy, but one time when I was looking after him, the angels appeared around me and told me he had a little problem. "I noticed he's not digesting the milk properly. Am I right?" I asked. "Yes," said the angels. "Wrap Christopher up well, put him in the stroller, and walk down to the telephone box." I did as I was asked, and when I got there, I was glad to see there was no one on the telephone. I rang the doctor and asked him to call to see Christopher. The doctor called that afternoon. It was a very cold day and lashing rain. The key was in the hall door, and the doctor called out, "Anyone at home?" As he walked in, I was sitting by the fire with Christopher on my knee, feeding him. I smiled at the doctor because all the angels followed him in. He sat down on the chair and said that it was lovely and cozy, and he heated his hands by the fire. He played with the baby for a minute and then asked me what was wrong. I told him I didn't think Christopher was digesting his milk properly. He looked at me strangely. The angels behind him told me to be careful about what I said. He throws up a lot, I added. Lorna, he said, laughing, all babies do that. As the doctor pulled his chair closer to examine Christopher, one of the angels touched Christopher's tummy, and he threw up. The milk went flying across the room. The doctor looked at me and said, "That's not normal." The doctor put a stethoscope to the baby's tummy and commented that any time he had seen a baby do what Christopher had just done, they had always turned out to be celiac. He then gave me a letter to see a specialist in Temple Street Children's Hospital in Dublin. Christopher was indeed celiac, so from then on, he was on a special diet. This meant there was a lot of visits to the hospital, and sometimes Christopher had to stay in for a few days, which was hard on him and on us. Joe worked on the garden every spare moment he had, and I must say it was really starting to take shape. One day, when I was watching Joe working in the garden, his guardian angel appeared for just a brief moment, and then other angels appeared around Joe, as if they were supporting him. I could see that the light around him was very weak. I started to cry, saying to myself, "No, it's not fair." I knew the angels were showing me that Joe was going to become sick. He did. He became very ill with gastric ulcer shortly afterward, and he was much sicker than most people with the same condition. This was to be a pattern with Joe for some reason that I never fully understood. When he got sick with something, he became much sicker than other people. Despite a special diet and lots of medication, Joe was very ill and unable to work for 6 months. As a result, he lost his job with a transport company, and we had to depend on the state social welfare to survive. It was a very difficult time for us, and although I didn't know it then, this was a pattern that was going to continue for the rest of his life. One day, when Christopher was 18 months old, I brought him out to the front garden to play, locked the little gate, and walked back into the house to make the beds, leaving the front door open. Angel Alicia appeared for just a moment. "Hello, Lorna. I'm just letting you know that you are going to have a visitor." Before I could say a word, Angel Alicia had disappeared. I laughed and said, "That was a quick visit." Alicia did not reappear. I did not give it another thought and continued making the beds every now and then, looking out the window to check on Christopher. When I walked into our little front room, I noticed a flash of light on the doorstep and heard a little laugh. The spirit of a little girl walked into the hall. She had long, wavy black hair and dark blue eyes. She was dressed in a coat with a black collar, a hat, and knee socks with black shoes. She danced into the kitchen and smiled at me. I followed her into the kitchen. This little spirit still had her guardian angel with her. I have rarely seen a spirit with its guardian angel. They normally stay with us only for a little while after death because a spirit doesn't need the help of a guardian angel after it has passed through the gates of what we call heaven. The little girl appeared as in flesh and blood, just like you or me. She had lived some time in the past, but I did not know quite how she had died. Her guardian angel was transparent, like a raindrop full of life. He reflected all colors, and he surrounded her. All guardian angels are similar in appearance, despite having distinguishing characteristics, a little like the way brothers and sisters are similar to each other, but have different characteristics. I have no difficulty telling a guardian angel from any type of angel. I could see the little girl's guardian angel moving around her, as if protecting her from the human world and everything in it. He did not even let her feet touch the ground. Sometimes he turned and smiled at me, then put his finger to his mouth, indicating I was not to say a word. The little girl turned around and skipped out of the kitchen into the hall and through the front door, and they both disappeared in a flash of light. Over the next few months, the little girl appeared with her guardian angel on many occasions. She only visited when the front door was open, but that was 99% of the time. The first time she spoke to me, she told me she had been all alone when she died. Then she looked up at her guardian angel and said, "I really did not know I had a guardian angel. I never knew you were there." The little girl's eyes seemed to fill with tears, and her guardian angel reached down and took the tears away. I could feel great love and emotion, and my own eyes filled with tears. The little girl said no more and skipped back out the door. Another time, she told me her name was Annie. I never seemed to get a chance to ask her questions because her guardian angel would always put his finger to his lips, indicating for me not to say a word. One morning, Angel Alicia appeared again. "Don't you dare disappear on me like you did last time," I immediately said. "Let us sit down on the doorstep," Angel Alicia said. "Alicia," I asked, "why are the spirit of this little girl and her guardian angel coming to see me?" "Lorna," he said, "Annie needs to know that someone loved her when she was alive. She died alone, and she thought no one loved her, not even her mom and dad. She could not find them when she was dying. Her guardian angel has brought Annie to you so you can be a parent to her. It's a big thing to ask of you, Lorna." "You know, Angel Alicia," I said, "it is working. I look forward to seeing Annie, even though she is a soul and not flesh and blood. I'm finding I have an attachment to her. I know her guardian angel is making that attachment grow into love because of us, between us. Thank you, Angel Alicia." "Goodbye now, Lorna," Alicia said as she disappeared. Annie's visit became more frequent, almost every day. Then one day she used my name. "Lorna," she said, "you know I died in a fire. I couldn't find anyone. I called out, but no one heard me. Where were my mommy and daddy? My mommy and daddy didn't care. They didn't love me. I remember lying down and crying, and when I woke up, I was in heaven." "Annie, when you go back to heaven," I replied, "you will meet your mom and dad, and you will know they love you." As I spoke these words, Annie reached out and touched me for a moment. In that hug, I felt her physical body. "That's all I need to know, that I was loved in the human world," she said, and she turned around with her guardian angel and ran out the door. I thank God. I felt happy to know that Annie was now settled in heaven with her parents. Sometimes it seems that God and the angels can't convince a spirit that they were loved when they lived. So God sent Annie to this human world of ours with her guardian angel so that she could be told that she was loved when she lived. It's hard to understand, but she needed to know that she was loved.